well as all of our esteemed members of the community. Welcome to our meeting. Before I do the board readout from closed session, we'd like to begin the meeting this evening with our Pledge of Allegiance. We will have the Pledge of Allegiance read this evening by Lola Voss from Carmel Middle School.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's our first time having a student board member do the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, so we're just getting some of our bearings, but we appreciate her being the first one for us. But if you don't mind, she has something for you.
So we'd like to present Lola with this appreciation of Carmel Middle School student Lola Voss for leading the Pledge of Allegiance at the September 8th, 2021 board meeting. Thank you so much. And as Tricia Zarevich mentioned, we are excited moving forward to have students from many of our sites go and read our Pledge of Allegiance moving ahead. So we are taking that duty outside of the Board of Education, and we're excited to feature more students in the meeting. As we emerged from closed session earlier, I'd just like to make note that for agenda item 2A and 2B coming out of closed, the board provided staff with parameters and guidance regarding those agenda items. And now I would like to notify our audience this evening that this open session is being audio taped and broadcast via YouTube. And I'd like to move on to agenda item 3D this evening, where we will take public comment on non-agendized items and reports. Anyone wishing to address the Board of Education on items within the board's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or regarding reports under item 3D may do so at this time. Community members wishing to address the Board of Education are allocated 3 minutes per speaker. Please note that speaking time cannot be delegated to another person. I would also like to make a friendly reminder out to our community that this Board of Education is committed to maintaining a respectful and productive environment that fosters a culture of civility where our staff, the community, and our board feel safe to express themselves. The board welcomes your comments and requests that you express yourself accordingly, and we thank you for your interest in our schools and in this meeting this evening. Is there anybody that would like to address the Board of Education?
On non-agenda items, so something that's not listed on the agenda, which we do have lights. If you are here for stadium lights, we have that later on the agenda.
Great, seeing that there's no comments, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 3E. This is where this evening we will have updates from our student representative, Hannah, ACT, CSEA comments, our Board of Education, and an update from our superintendent. These are routine status updates regarding campus activities, meetings, conferences, meetings attended, and recent developments. So this evening we'll start with our student update from Hannah Philly.
Hello. So it has definitely been a very busy week at school, very hectic, but a lot of good things coming too, because we've been planning for homecoming and Powder Puff, which Powder Puff is currently pending at the moment with all the students getting diagnosed with COVID. And there was actually a lot of fear from students that I talked to today, because they, I think, have a lot of elder parents at home and we're feeling a little nervous being around so many kids at school. But I think that everyone was really proactive about it, and I personally got tested at school today, and I know a lot of other classes did. So I think that what Ms. Powers, our leadership teacher, was talking about today was just preventing it and trying to get as ahead of it as we possibly can. And so I think we're getting it done really, really well. So hopefully that continues to improve, and students can continue to come back, and the dances and all the sporting events can proceed positively. And there's also a new testing schedule, not COVID-19 testing, but school testing, quizzes and tests. And it was highly actually requested by the students last week, because they felt that they were overwhelmed with projects and staying up way too late. And all the teachers, again, were really proactive on it. And I think within a week, a new testing schedule has come out. So hopefully with block periods and everything, students are going to feel like they can manage their time better and do their best possible job at work without getting too tired or burnt out with sports and too much schoolwork. And also with clubs continuing, we've just passed more today in the ASB meeting, so there's a lot of positive activity on campus still going on, and everyone's continuing to stay very involved. And I think overall it's still been a fun and inclusive back to school month so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I'll go ahead and take comments from our association representatives. Bill Schreier, would you like to address the board on behalf of ACT?
Good evening, everyone. Bill Schreier, president of ACT. I want to pick up on what Hannah just talked about.
I'm sorry, Bill, can I pause you to put the mic up? Sorry about
Well,
that.
there you go.
Sorry.
The guy who coaches a team involved in public speaking doesn't know what I'll enter another appearance. Bill Schreier, president of ACT. I want to pick up on what Hannah said about anxiety. Obviously, there's going to be some, but I was talking to my students today, and I think it's safe to say that we have a lot of layers of mitigation strategies in place. I would not be comfortable in a classroom if I didn't think it was safe. And so, who's ever watching tonight, I think that's the sentiment of the teachers and staff, that sure, we can improve, but we're doing a good job right now. And that is, I think, lessening some of the anxiety. So I'm glad you mentioned that. The only other thing I want to talk about today is a meeting I had this morning with the superintendent, which was really positive. It was probably the hardest conversation we've had thus far, and has to do with some of the procedural nuances of the relationship between the association and the district. But I think we worked a lot out. I left the meeting feeling very positive about where we were going, and I appreciate that we've already scheduled regular collaborations going forward. So there's a lot on the agenda. That's all I want to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bill. Lisa, would you like to address the board on behalf of CSCA?
Now I have to lower it, right? I'm Lisa. I'm the vice president of CSEA and am assigned at Carmel High School. And we don't have a lot going on in CSEA. I did want to kind of comment on what Hannah said about the COVID concerns. And it struck me something I've been reading recently, that Marcus Aurelius, who is a Stoic and was a Roman emperor, once wrote in his Meditations that the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. And while I would prefer that it be more like dancing than wrestling, right now I think we're all kind of wrestling. And I just want to kind of acknowledge that this is hard for the students, it's hard for the staff, and it's hard for the parents. I talked to many, many parents this week who are concerned with mitigation strategies, with exposure, with kids being able or not being able to do things. And I just want to say to the parents, we are doing our best. We're trying to keep the students safe. And we do love to hear from you, because we know you're concerned and we're concerned too. CSEA-wise, we are working with the district on additional MOUs regarding COVID safety issues. We are in the process of visiting each site and meeting with the staff at every site to hear them and to get their input so that we can bring that back to district staff and be able to address those concerns at the lowest possible level, which is really our goal. And really, that's all we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to updates or comments from the Board of Education, and I'll start with Tess Arthur.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to comment on a couple brief things. I went to the shoe game, and it was extremely heartwarming to see how many people showed up and the level of support and just the spirit involved on both sides. We had to sit on the PG side, unfortunately, because there was absolutely no seating on the visitor side, which was us. But I'm just really proud of the character, the spirit of both teams and how they conducted themselves. I actually thought we were going to lose that varsity game in the very beginning, but we held the shoe. So anyhow, I just wanted to comment on it. It was great to see the school spirit out there alive and well. The other comment I wanted to make is I had a great conversation with Bridget Randazzo, who has a new position at the high school this year. And she's so thankful to the board for allowing her this opportunity, and she is absolutely slaying it. And she's such a bright light, and I just wanted to highlight what she brings to our student body and our school, and just her energy and her love for these kids is quite heartwarming as well. So that's it for me.
What's the position?
She is avid, but she is also helping kids get caught up who have struggled through the last year.
Gotcha.
So, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Carl, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Yeah, that shoe game was interesting and quite a bit of fun, I think, for both schools. Not so much for PG, because they have not won in an awful long time. But, you know, canceling the games has been, I announced the football up there for the varsity only, and it's been tough canceling those games for the kids because, you know, I mean, the season's already underway and it's getting pretty short. But, and I've had people call me too about what's going on with the COVID at Carmel High and what, you know, and all this and that. The plan up there is rock solid in terms of how they're dealing with the kids. And typically, Carmel, we always seem to be out in front of the news, but I can guarantee you this is not going to be the only high school that has these kinds of issues. It's just that we are the ones that are all over it and identifying the kids. And the thing too that I think needs to be said is the communication from both the school, that'd be Principal Lyons, and Ted, our new superintendent, has been outstanding. John's back there. You have friends. I know you do, John.
I needed a table, sorry, I just needed a table.
Okay, fair enough. But, you know, timely communication right on the spot. Nobody has to wonder what we're doing. They may not all like it, but they sure understand exactly what's happening, and that's coming from central office as well. So this too shall pass, friends.
Thank you. Anne Marie?
Hello, hi everyone out there. I'm so happy to see people out there. This is so much fun to actually see faces. Thank you. I just wanted to mention I've been going out to Tular. I went out to Tular about the exercise program that they have in the morning. I encourage people who would like to just go out there and just see the kids going and having fun and exercising and getting their family and friends and things to go around the track and have open meeting time so they can enjoy themselves. I meet out in Kashawa on Monday nights, so anybody who would like to come out and join me, we have a great time out there. The kids are kindergarten through high school, so we do a little bit of tutoring from about 4 to 6 or so. Beth, Heather, and Estrella out there are dedicated rocks, and I'm so proud that they are out there, and I'm pleased that as Punch we have that open for the kids after school. I've had a meeting with the CTE and ROP over in Salinas, and we're going to have another one tomorrow night. So the Career Tech Ed is alive and well. And I wanted to finish it off with a quote from Dan Buettner, who is a National Geographic explorer and author of The Blue Zones, Lessons for Living Longer from the People Who Live the Longest. And it said, surround yourself with at least 3 friends who care about you on a bad day. That's worth about 8 years of life expectancy. So I will leave you with that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. I will keep in the interest of everybody's time this evening, I'll keep my comments short before I pass it over to you, Ted. I do want to give a shout out to our classified staff and our teachers. I understand and can appreciate the resilience and the perseverance that it's taking to go through these COVID gymnastics. And I really am thankful that we have all of you leading the charge on this. I'd also like to thank all of our administrators for the continued thorough communication that's going out from your offices to our parents. And then, of course, the communications that are coming from Ted and the DO that are also going out to our community regarding our COVID status. I know this is taking up a lot of time and energy for effort for everyone. And I appreciate what everybody's doing to help us get through this very trying time. I also would like to just, again, congratulate our team on keeping the shoe. And it has come to my attention that the JV game is called the sock game, and the varsity is the shoe game. So I'd like to congratulate our JV team in winning the sock. And with that, I'll keep it short and pass it off to you, Ted.
Thank you, Sarah. It has been an interesting and great month since we last met. Our COVID response is definitely up and running. I appreciate the comments on the communication. On that note, I would like to welcome Jessica Hull, who's out in the audience tonight, our new community relations and communications director, who we cannot wait to get on board. But thank her for being tonight. There's been a lot going on. Classes are going well. Craig Chavez, Chief Human Resources Officer, and I have been doing our COVID Roadshow. We've gone out and met with every staff except 2 Arcitos is tomorrow morning. So just want to thank our staffs for their partnership, for their thoughtfulness. They've asked great questions. They've continued to help us modify our process and make sure that anything that we didn't think of, they showed a lot of thoughtfulness in helping us craft where we're at right now, to make sure that, again, as Bill said, keep our classroom safe. None of us would feel comfortable going out there if we didn't feel that they were safe. On the topic of COVID, as was mentioned earlier, we do have an outbreak at the high school. When you look at it, we've had about 15 cases over the last 14 days, which does seem alarming. To Carl's point, others will follow. This will be the trend. I believe that trend is already flattened out. We've hired contact tracers. We have a very robust testing system, and 100% believe that this is just a minor flare-up and it will work itself out, and we will continue to teach and learn in the full in-person manner that we have been. One thing that I did want to mention to the board, in case they have heard, one of the things that the California Department of Public Health did this year that really helped us out was they created a modified quarantine process. So any student who is a close contact doesn't necessarily have to go home for 10 days as they did in the past. They can stay in school if they have been a close contact, but if they are unvaccinated, they are not allowed by state policy to participate in after-school athletics, clubs, any of those activities. So although that would be heartbreaking for a student to not be able to, say, play on the football team for 10 days, we are happy that the state has acknowledged that they do need to stay in the classroom. So I'm going to be sending out a correspondence probably again in the morning, just to make sure that all of our community understands that modified quarantine process, and that our goal continues to be to keep kids in school full in person, which we're doing. But the health mandate does say that students who are in a modified quarantine are not allowed to participate in athletics. And to end on a couple celebrations, I also have been able to get out and see some of our games. I was able to see Hannah down there play a great game of volleyball against Monterey. The girls looked really good out there. Enjoyed the shoe game as well, and have just really enjoyed getting out in the community and seeing our students. And then myself, along with, I believe, Blaze and Craig, spent Friday over here at the middle school at Ohana Day. It was a great opportunity to just watch kids get in partners. We each got to lead a group of 8 students who didn't really know each other, bring them together, go through various obstacle courses and activities, and just really get a reminder of why we do what we do. And it was a great day, and really want to thank the staff here at Carmel Middle School for putting that on. That's all I have.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for all of your thoughtful updates. We'll move on to agenda item number 4. This is the consent calendar. Pursuant to Board Bylaw 9322, and in order to promote efficient meetings, the board may bundle a number of items and act upon them together through the usage of a consent calendar agenda. Consent agenda items are reserved for routine items that are deemed to be non-controversial and allow a governing board to save the bulk of its meeting and time for subjects about which there is need for discussion or debate. Consent items shall be items of a routine nature and items for which board discussion is not anticipated and for which the superintendent recommends approval. All matters listed under the consent calendar will be considered by the board in one motion by roll call vote pursuant to Board Bylaw 9322. The board will accept public comment on these items, but there will be no discussion on these items prior to the time the board votes on the motion unless members of the board request specific items to be removed from the calendar for discussion. Do I have any public comment for agenda item number 4, the consent calendar? Seeing that there's no public comment, may I please receive a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
A second.
Board President Sarah Hines,
Yes.
Board Clerk Tess Arthur,
Yes.
Board Member Anne Marie Rosen,
Yes.
Board Member Carl Palestrini.
Yes.
Agenda item number 5. These are action, discussion, and information items this evening. The board will accept public comment on each item when it is taken up by the board. This evening, we have a few public hearings, so these will run a little differently than regular agenda items, so I will go ahead and explain that process. For agenda item 5A, this is a public hearing to receive comments on the draft environmental impact report, the EIR, for the proposed stadium lights project at Carmel High School. Dan Paul, before I call you up, or please come up, I'll let the audience know. So what we'll do this evening is we are going to open the hearing. I will hear the presentation by staff and EMC consultants. I will then open up and hear comments from the public. I will then, after that, hear comments from our board and Hannah, who is our student representative, and then we will go ahead and close the hearing. So I will officially open the hearing.
Okay, I'm going to be very brief. This is just to recognize that this, as Sarah said, is a public hearing. There's no action by the board tonight. There's no approvals. We have our consultant, Stuart, with EMC Planning Group, will give a very brief overview of the process for the comments on the EIR, and he's here to record any comments that we can then act on as we move forward in the process. So, Stuart?
Excellent, thank you. And welcome, Stuart.
Hi, hello Board President Hines and board members. My name is Stuart Poulter and I'm with EMC Planning Group, land use and environmental consulting firm here on the Monterey Peninsula. The school district has hired EMC to prepare the environmental impact report, or EIR, to evaluate the environmental impacts of the high school stadium lights project pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. I spoke with you a few months ago during the scoping meeting for the project, where comments were received on the scope of the EIR. And since then, the draft EIR has been prepared and was released for a required 45-day public review period starting on August 13th. The draft EIR and notice of availability is available for the public to review on the school district's website and at the school district's main office. Though not required, CEQA does encourage lead agencies, in this case the school district, to hold a public hearing to give the public the opportunity to comment on the draft EIR. The school district has decided to use this board meeting as an opportunity for public comments to be received. The purpose of this public hearing is not to address specific questions on the draft EIR analysis or the project more generally. The hearing is intended only to receive public comments that will be addressed in preparation of what's known as the final EIR. Verbal comments on the draft EIR will be accepted this evening. However, written comments are encouraged and will be accepted until Monday, September 27th. Written comments can be directed to Dan Paul, the Director of Facilities and Transportation. Dan's contact information is provided on the notice of availability that went out with the draft EIR. At the end of the 45-day public review period, a final EIR will be prepared responding to public comments received. The board will be asked to consider certifying the final EIR as adequately prepared pursuant to CEQA at a board meeting after completion of the final EIR. That concludes my brief overview of the EIR process. I'd be happy to address specific questions on the CEQA process. However, just a reminder that there will be no back and forth questions and answers on the specifics of the content of the draft EIR. So,
Great, thank you so much. So with that, before I turn it over to the board and Hannah, we will hear comments now from the public on this agenda item.
You can please go ahead and step to the podium.
Thank you.
My name is Belle James. I live across the street from the tennis courts at Carmel High. I don't know about the environmental impact. The lights, I'm not worried about. I can close my curtains if they're in my shop, in my bedroom, but that isn't the issue. On Morse Drive, we have signs up that says there's no parking from 7:15 in the morning until noon, Monday through Friday. This is because the students used to park on the street and it gets unsafe. They have had day games and this road gets very narrow with people parking down the street. I am assuming that if we're going to put lights up, we're assuming that there's going to be night games. That means these people that have been parking on the street are going to be parking on the street at night. I have neighbors immediately to my south that have 3 small children. I think the oldest is 8 or 9. I can just see them going out in the street to pick up their kitty cat. People can't get through the street, it's too narrow. So it isn't the lights that are the issue, it's the football games or whatever is going to be taking events at night with these lights. Like I said, the county put up the signs, no parking, 7:15 till noon, and it's helped the issue. The other thing is, I like to be positive. I don't like to just say, don't do this because we can't park. We have a baseball field. The gates are closed. Open the gates, let them park down in the baseball field. On the side of the road going down to the baseball field, it's marked, no parking because of fire access. There used to be a path that went from the baseball field up past the tennis courts. If you have money to spend, maintain that path so they don't have to walk up past fire-restricted parking. Okay, that's just a positive. But the path now has been closed off. You can't walk from the baseball field up to the campus anymore without walking up the street. So my concern is parking when there's a ball game going on. It isn't just the students, it's parents, the grandparents, they're getting off of work, they're late, the parking lot is full, and they come and park down here. It's just not safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else that would like to address the board on this topic? And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier. You each will have 3 minutes to speak.
I would like to echo what, I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is, but what she was saying about the parking problem. I live on North Carmel Hills Drive, the second house from the high school. I have lived there for 32 years. And during football games, no matter who the opponent is, it is a nightmare. Cars are parked on both sides of the street. They are parked in clearly noted no parking spots. These extend over into Flanders, the parking, and it is impossible to get an emergency vehicle through. It is impossible. I saw the mitigation plan that was described. That mitigation plan does not take into account that overflow parking that we have been citing and the safety issues that winds up bringing up. And so that's one concern that I have. And probably it's my chief concern, to be very honest. The second issue I want to bring up is actually 2 issues. One, I was reading the objectives for the lighting, and I did not find a compelling reason to have games scheduled at night. For example, provide the capability of host sports events and games on campus at night when students, parents, and community members can more easily attend. Where is the evidence? Where is the explanation of why that would be the case rather than Saturday afternoon games? I don't see the compelling reason there. create a new healthy weekend social opportunity for students while building school spirit through the ability to host nighttime games, and this is important, and events. What events those are remains unclear at Carmel High School Stadium. Again, I don't understand how night games, unless we're in Texas and it's Friday Night Lights, that this becomes something that is indeed a clear and specific objective. And so then the third point I want to make is I really didn't see a careful explanation of other alternatives. I thought the alternatives were strongman arguments. For example, can lighting that is transitional be put in? Like for Powder Puff, they bring in lighting, right? Why couldn't that be done for practices? So when we're looking at 37 night games and the impact, can I have 20 more seconds?
I'm sure, yes, but please keep it to 20 seconds.
Okay. So when we have 37 games at night with increased attendance, the impact on safety is going to be really significant. And again, really a lack of compelling reason. Finally, there's the Sunshine Act put out to make the nationwide daylight savings time. What effect would that wind up having on the need for lights? So, and by the way, it's strongly supported by a whole range of Republican legislatures in the Senate. Thank you.
Is there anybody else wishing to address the board on this topic?
I will.
I'm Joan Wellington, and I live on a cul-de-sac just a block north of Carmel High School. And I've lived there for 40 years, raised teenagers, now have grandchildren. My kitchen window, where my sink is, looks right out on the street. So I have been watching Carmel High students for many years. I go out on the street and I let them know that there's no parking and they may get a ticket. I'll put a note on the car. I'm pro-student, I'm pro-teenager. I've spent a lot of years picking up garbage on that street from lunches. And alcohol bottles, unfortunately. I agree with the previous speakers, and so I'm not going to, reinvent the wheel, so to speak. However, my concern is the alcohol, and nighttime social events foster the use of alcohol. I don't think you're going to see too many people with paper bags of beer or whatever during day games, but I think in the evening you are going to see more parents and probably students bringing alcohol. So why set up events that would put kids in a bad place? That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to address the Board of Education on this topic?
My name is Rob Wellington. I'm Joni's husband. We both live at 25175 Stewart Place. And I want to indicate, first of all, I want to commend you for your service to the community. I mean, we all know there's school boards that are really taking the gaff across the country. And I know you have an awful lot on your table, especially with COVID at the schools and such. So you're to be commended. Thank you for your service. Over many years, I've known the EMC principals for at least 40 years. And I've read many environmental impact reports. And there's a little secret involved, which I'll only admit here, is that usually if the EIR is written to favor the project that the person who hired the EIR consultant is preparing with regard to it. And I can give you one example. I was going to give some, I'll I'm gonna put my comments in writing. They're just scratched out on a piece of paper as I went through the EIR. An example of the EIR and the sort of the favoritism, if you look at figures 5.2, 5.5, and 5.4, which are those contact points where they show what the impact of the lights will be. Well, look at those photos again. They're not taken at nighttime. There's already, it might have been a mid-dusk or something like that, but they don't really make the point that they're intended to make, and they're misleading, I have to say. With regard to the parking, that's the important thing for where we live. It is a cul-de-sac, as my wife mentioned. That's the sign that folks mentioned, that there's no parking from 7 a.m. to noon. That was started about 15 years ago on Stewart Place, because there were so many cars parked where the students were parking there. There was an emergency situation where the vehicles could not get down to the end of the street, the fire trucks and the ambulances. And that's when that signs first came up there. They're now found all over the neighborhood. And as they saying, they're observed in the breach. And we try not to be, too picky at it, but there's still a lot of parking there, and the garbage and such that we see. I guess relative to the lights, I think you all need to impact. We're not so impacted by the lights, but I feel so sorry for those people who are going to be within the glare, because the lights at nighttime can really be overcoming. Most people can't just pull their curtains. There's still that ambience that you're going to miss. And then finally, I'd like to mention the matter of the Public Records Act. The Public Records Act allows a request of any public agency to provide documents, as you probably well know. I've read a couple of the comments from the NOP relative to discussion about a deed or agreement having to do with limitations on property conveyed to the district. And I'd like a copy of those documents sent to me, and I will provide this in writing to you.
Okay.
But it's sufficient that I do it orally at this time as well.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wellington. If you could please provide that request for the public records in writing, that would be great. And I would also like to acknowledge, Mr. Wellington, that the Board of Education is in receipt of your letter to all of us, along with the attached signatures from the petition. So thank you.
Actually, my wife.
Oh, apologies, I was, no, I'm sorry. Is there anybody else wishing to address the Board of Education on this topic?
Hello, my name is Linda Strand, and I live on Whitman Circle. A lot of circles up there. I just want to clarify what you just said a minute ago, Sarah. You did receive our petition with almost 100 signatures. Is that what you were talking about?
That is correct. I'm in receipt. The entire Board of Education is in
Okay, I
receipt.
just wanted to make sure, because that was put together in about 4 or 5 days. I mean, with no time, over a long holiday weekend. The neighborhood is not happy about the plans for the lighting, which has been gone over many, many times here tonight. Another thing that hasn't been mentioned much is the noise. During graduation in May or June at the high school, I can be inside my house or outside and hear every student's name that's graduating and all the good news, and it's happy and it's joyful, and the band is playing like crazy. But it can't compare to what a football game could sound like. God forbid when we or the other side gets a field goal or some kind of a point. It's the noise level that echoes down in all these cul-de-sacs and all these little valleys. That's extremely bothersome, that echoes in those folds of the land. I urge all of you, if you'd like to come and listen and maybe do some sound tests, because that's happened elsewhere, I know that for a fact, to see what it is that I'm talking about. And I don't really have good hearing, to tell you the truth, but that's what is many people are afraid of, in addition, obviously, to the lights. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to address the Board of Education at this time? Okay. So with that, thank you all for taking the time this evening to speak to us on this very important topic. We do appreciate it. I will now hear comments from the board and Hannah, and I will hand it over to Hannah first, since the majority of the events that will be led at the stadium will be involving our student population.
Thank you. And I really appreciate all of you coming in and saying your opinions on this, because it's really important, because I think that you guys brought up a lot of points that have not been brought up, obviously with students at the school, because they don't have that extended perspective on the issue of the whole matter. Like parking, I had not heard of that from any students until today. And I think that's a really good point, because I was remembering when I was at the shoe game, I walked a very long time and we had to park on some random street, and I know the vast majority of people had to do that as well, which is definitely a potential issue and a safety thing as well. But as far as the student side of it, what we were talking about today is that people feel that when we have night games, there's a much larger turnout from the student body. And I know that you mentioned that, and that does come with pros and cons. But I think that people at school overall feel that it builds a lot of spirit and more togetherness, where people from, I think, all walks of campus feel more like comfortable going, because it turns into such a fun kind of event circled around togetherness and cheering together. And that was Miss Powers definitely agreed that it brings more spirit. And one of the kids in our class today said it was like a movie when we do it at night, which I kind of agree. Like there's just definitely a distinctive feeling that brings the community closer together. And we would also be able to, someone said, host more, which I agree. We would be able to kind of promote our school in a different way and bring in people from all over the community, and they can, from different schools as well. And I know that they would really, sorry? Oh, no, which I know it is good and bad, because then there's lots of issues, but we would be able to positively promote our school, because we do have a beautiful, beautiful campus, and we want to share it and, promote what we have. And I believe that is all, but no, I do agree. There is a lot to weigh in about this, and I think it's really, really important that we have a lot of people from all ages and all perspectives talking about it together.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing forth the student perspective. It's appreciated. And I'll go ahead and turn it over for any comments from the board on this topic. Carl?
Yeah. I think the parking issue up there is clearly something we have to work on. And the first lady that spoke, her comments about kids parking on the baseball field to go to school in the morning have to walk directly into the face of traffic incoming to that lower field with the youngest student drivers we have, because they can no longer go from the baseball field up that, what was an avenue, kind of series of steps for kids to get to the football field and then go to school. We have to do something with that. Something has got to be done, because that is an accident, in my opinion, waiting to happen. It's not news to Dan. We've talked about it. It's got its expensive ins and outs. Ted hasn't heard it. He just got here. John has been working with COVID. So I think that's something that really resonated with me. But we have to also remember this too. The lights are not just for games. They're for practices. And when Governor Newsom declared the late start, which is, I believe, is it next year or the year after? I think it's next year.
Correct.
Well, daylight savings time passed in California, but it never was enacted. So the kids need to be able to practice. And I think that that's something that you need to know, that it's not just game day stuff. It's getting those kids out there so they can get those practices in when the late start takes place, because they're going to be getting out of school later, out of the academic classes. So I just wanted to make that particular clarification. Other than that, I think, the points are very good, and hard to follow Hannah. She's quite articulate. I'm also responsible for a lot of that noise, because when I announce the games, maybe we need to tone it down just a little bit. So we hear you folks, but there are really good, compelling issues on both sides of this.
Thank you, Carl. Anne Marie, Tess?
No comments.
No comments.
what I just wanted to make a statement that I did hear about the parking. I am a parent of 2 children who went to Carmel High School and 3 nephews who all played sports, who were at school, after school, almost in the dark when they were practicing. And as you push the school day back further, that is going to become very impactful. It is something that has really weighed on my mind into how we are going to address that issue. So it's not going to be just the games, it's going to be other sports are going to be having to use that field to practice and to have their games at night. So it's going to be more than just the few football games now. I hate to say that to you. But, so I mean, I'm echoing Carl with parking. Parking is an issue all over that campus. And I just wanted to say that I really want to make sure that we are working as a community partner and know that we are listening to what you have to say, and we are really trying to address those issues in the best way that we possibly can and try to work to make it so it's the best possible outcome for not only for our schools, but for the community as well. So, thank you.
I'd just like to add that the district does and has been working on long-range parking perspective. Dan, might at some point want to talk to you a little bit more about what some of those plans are in terms of how to better use the space at the high school. So maybe that stuff also needs to be out there to the community in terms of some of our thinking, because we realize that aside from lights, the parking is an issue with without the lights. And I was principal up there when we did close, the street heading up the hill from Carmel High. We tried a lot of things. We tried to get that easement from Caltrans that's right there, which would have been perfect. I went as far as I could with that, and no, they don't want to give it up. It's a staging area. So we're looking at alternatives. It's not like we're kind of asleep at the wheel on this thing. So I think it needs to be said that there is some long-range planning, and maybe superintendent and John, the principal, can start sharing some of the thinking on how we might mitigate that.
I'd like, Dan, could you please address late start and some of the parking consideration that went into the EIR, please?
Sure. We looked at late start, and from some of the planning we've done in the past, it would push the school day back a minimum of 45 minutes for start time. So when we look at the practice times, when you get into late November and December, you're dark by 5 o'clock. So if school ends at 4, the kids go and change out, you're not out on the field before 4:30 organizing practice. We have multiple teams that will need to access the field in the winter. So you're running out of daylight and not able to get your boys and girls soccer team. There's JV and varsity. When you get into the spring, the start of the field hockey season is in the dark. So it's a number of the sporting events that are not only the practices, but their games as well. I know football draws the main crowd, but they will all need to have some time to practice. And there's the idea of, well, we get them out of school early, but you start to impact the instructional periods of the kids. If you have to pull them out early to take them to an away game or get them out on the field so they can play in the daylight, now you're impacting what they're really there for, which is education. The parking we've looked at as part of our master plan, there are a number of options in the master plan, but right now none of them are funded. We did buy the property here at the middle school, which would allow us to move some of our athletic facilities to the middle school and expand parking at the high school. As I said, that's unfunded right now, and we have options when we secure a funding source that we can increase the parking. We do recognize the impact on the community. I've been here a long time, like Carl, and we've done a number of things to the high school parking lot, reconfiguration and expansion, but we just can't keep up with the demand.
Thank you. Ted, do you have any questions or comments on the EIR?
I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank Hannah for your courage. It takes a lot to stand in here as the lone voice for 800 students at Carmel High School, but I know as we've talked to other students, this is something that's important to them. I think they see their friends and family members in other districts able to have that Friday night light experience, and I do think it's important to our students. And I believe they'll continue to let us know that. I also don't believe that I heard anything tonight that we can't overcome. I heard a lot of problems that I think we have solutions for, that I think if we work together, we can figure these things out and we can find a way to make sure that our students still get the experience that they deserve, while our community members are able to continue the lifestyle that they've become accustomed to. So I know we look forward to continuing to work with our students, our staff, and our community to find that right spot where everybody wins. So thank you all.
Well said, thank you, Ted.
Can I make a comment? It sounds like we're putting the cart before the horse. We're gonna get the lights, then we're gonna work on parking. How about working on parking, then get the lights?
Dan, I just have one last question. What is the next step after, just so our public understands sort of the process that you're going through? Would you or Stuart like to explain, where do we go from here?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the draft EIR is out for public review for the 45-day public review period. That'll end on September 27th. We'll receive all the public comments that come in by that date, and the final EIR, which will be presented to the board at a later meeting date, will incorporate all of those comments, and if there's any changes or anything like that that need to be made to the EIR, it'll be reflected in that final EIR. So,
okay. Great, thank you so much. And are there any more comments or questions on this topic?
I just wanted to go back to the community mind again. I think that if you take a look at all of us that are sitting here on the board, Hannah included, that we are all very community minded and that we are looking towards solutions towards that. John, who is up at the high school, and Ted are all solution people. They are looking for solutions all the time to all the different problems that we're looking at. So they're very creative, very industrious, and we'd love to hear from, what you have to say about it. You have your time to make comments about it. Help us look for solutions as well. So when you're putting it out there, not just put out the problem, but say, hey, this might work or this might work. I'd love to see that kind of input as well. So thank you.
How about busing from the junior, from here? We've got lots of parking here.
I'm sorry, ma'am, the time for public comment is over. I'm sorry, ma'am, we're not taking any more public comment. I'm sorry about that. So if there's no more questions or comments from the board, I'd like to thank Ted for your thoughtful comments. I think that was very well said. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Stuart. We'll look forward to seeing the next readout of the EIR, and I'm going to go ahead and close this hearing for the draft environmental impact report for the proposed stadium lights project at Carmel High School. Thank you. And we are going to move on to agenda item 5B. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Oh, no.
No, thank you.
I'm not like anti-Carmel High.
Lived in the area through to.
All right, so we'll go ahead and keep this thing moving along here. This is agenda item 5B. Carl, this is the public hearing on resolution number 21-30. This is request approval regarding sufficiency of instructional materials. Again, I will go ahead and open this hearing. We will hear the presentation by staff, hear comments from the public, then we'll hear questions from the Board of Education, and then I'll go ahead and close the hearing. So we will officially open the hearing and pass it off to you, Blaze.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So California Ed Code requires that the Board of Education conduct a hearing each year on or prior to the 8th week of school to adopt a resolution stating whether or not there are sufficient instructional materials in our subject areas. Now, our process begins in the springtime when we send out to our sites a spreadsheet that shows all of our adopted materials and instructional materials, and they basically do accounting on what they have and what they need. They give us that information. We then put together purchase orders, and come July 1st, we put them out, send those purchase orders out to our vendors to make sure that we are getting everything on time. We're monitoring what's coming. Lisa knows as well. Watching what's coming in and what hasn't arrived yet, what books we're still missing. And then at the very beginning of the school year, We asked the sites to fill out an affidavit for us that lets us know whether or not they have everything that we've ordered, that we're required to have. And they fill that out, and either they are telling us, yes, they have everything, or something is on order and they know it's in route or it's in process and it's coming. And so that is our process, and this is a required hearing on that process that we have each year.
Great, thank you, Blaze. If there's anybody here from the public left, I think it's just you, Marvin, again. Oh, and Bill, I'm sorry. Any comments we will hear now?
I know I'm not technically the public, but I just want to give a
No,
little
thank
insight
you.
into how this works, because that's kind of dry. I got, no, I mean, honestly, I got an email at the end of last year from Michelle Mahaney saying, hey, you know, you can get a new textbook for AP Human Geography. Wasn't even on my radar. And the seamlessness with which that happened was incredible. And I've told her that, and I hope I've told you that. And now my students have the latest edition of the AP Human Geography textbook that we've been using. So, you know, this is not just happening spontaneously. You have some really good people doing that, and I want to make sure they know that. So thank you.
Thank you for that example, Bill. That was helpful. Are there any other comments from the public regarding this agenda item? Okay. I will hear questions and comments from the board on this agenda item, this topic.
An odd question. If I wanted to purchase one of the old math textbooks rather than having to resource it through Amazon, is it possible?
It's, if we have a book that is it's not our currently adopted material and we still have it in possession, there are processes for us to donate or to get rid of those materials, which require board action. So I'd have to look specifically how we do that and if we have what you're looking for.
Great. If there aren't any further questions or comments, I will go ahead. Oh, Ted, do you have any comments?
I just wanted to ask Hannah for the student opinion of, do you feel when you're in classes you have the resources that you need? To Mr. Schreier's point, do you feel you have the latest and greatest when it comes to materials in your classroom?
Actually, I do, because it's because we usually use the online textbook or the online version of whatever, which is typically the most updated. I remember for US history last year, it was like the very newest version of the textbook because they offer it in the computer version, so anyone can just log in at any time they need. But in terms of like the physical version of the textbook, I know that the teachers have them in the classes if they need a copy of it. Like today in psychology, I got to read an actual book that he had to offer to check out. And to be honest, I'm not sure how up to date they are because we really don't use them that often. But I think it kind of depends on the class.
Thank you.
Okay, I will go ahead and close this hearing. Thank you so much, Blaze.
Thank you.
I know you're sticking with us. For agenda item 5C, this is resolution number 21-30 regarding sufficiency of instructional materials approval request. Do we have any public comment on agenda item 5C? Seeing there's none, go ahead, Blaze.
Okay, I'm recommending that the board approve resolution 2130 on item 5C.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2130 regarding sufficiency of instructional materials.
I second.
Board President Sarah Hines.
Yes.
Board Clerk Tess Arthur.
Yes.
Board Member Carl Palestrini.
Yes.
Board Member Anne Marie Rosen.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I forgot you were with us again. Agenda item 5D. This is the first reading and approval request for board policy 6158.4, independent study for 2021-2022 school year.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Do we, sorry, do we have any public comment on agenda item 5D?
Seeing none.
All righty. Recently passed Assembly Bill 130, AB 130 requires that all districts to offer long-term independent study for the 2021-2022 school year to receive apportionment for students choosing the option. Optionally, districts can meet the requirement by utilizing inter-district transfer agreements with another district to provide independent study for students. Policy 6158.4 is the proposed temporary policy for the 21-22 school year that complies with AB 130 and indicates how CUSD will meet the requirement. And it was developed with the help of our legal team. We are holding the first reading and asking you approve the policy because the state requires policy changes for this school year, and we felt it prudent to expedite the matter. We are partnering with North Monterey County Unified School District to provide students with long-term independent study for the school year. We've partnered with them at the high school level for many, many years, and now all levels can use their K through 12 virtual e-school to meet that requirement.
Blaze, I'll open it up to the board for any questions or comments. I just had a quick question. How many students do we have currently?
I talked to Paul about this. It's kind of more on the Paul side, but I think we have less than 40, 32. We have 32 students total across the entire district.
That's the exact question I just wrote down, so thank you for asking.
And will there be any sort of benchmark assessment for those students of how well it worked for them, or if there was areas for improvement? Is there any process or protocol for that since?
Well, they are technically in another school district,
Right,
so they would be assessed there
Okay.
through their assessment process. If they came back to us, if they terminated in our district and came back home, they would fall back into our normal assessment process, and we would be assessing them like we did any other student.
Okay. Thank you.
Just one quick one, please. What's the process for going back and forth? What if they do want to come back?
They can choose to terminate at any time. And since they are our current students and they live in our areas, we would have to take them back, and we would take them back. So we've recommended, and in our communications with families about it, especially at the secondary level, that it would make sense to, if you're going to transfer back, to do it at the end of a semester. So you're getting the credit you need, and you don't, if you transfer mid-semester, there could be issues with, articulating that. So, but yes, they can come back if they choose to do so.
Do you have any comments on this one?
No, I just thank the board for understanding rather than a traditional first reading and second reading. AB 130 was adopted fairly late, and they asked schools to get this passed within 30 days of the first day, or 6 days of the first day of school. So Blaze has been working diligently on this. As he said, the partnership with North Monterey County is working well. This is just getting it wrapped up with a bow on the back end side, but the instruction has been happening.
And this is a one-year policy, so it'll terminate at the end of the year, and we'll revert back to our previous. This one will come off the books.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
May I please receive a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading and approval request for board policy 6158.
I second.
Board President Sarah Hines.
Yes.
Board Clerk Tess Arthur.
Yes.
Board Member Carl Palestrini.
Yes.
Board Member Anne Marie Rosen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blaze. Moving along to agenda item 5E with Yvonne. This is our fiscal year 2020-2021 unaudited actuals financials report. I'll go ahead and take any public comment on agenda item 5E. Seeing there's none, go ahead, Yvonne.
Yes, I'm pleased to present the unaudited actuals for the board's review. I have taken the very long 155-page report and summarized it down into some tables that hopefully make it easier for the board and the public to understand where we are financially in the district.
And we do thank you for that.
Thank you. We are required every year to report the unaudited actuals to the board, and it has to be turned into the County Office of Ed by September 15th, and it's important always for us to meet that deadline. And so it is the financial summary of the operations for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. So the summary report if you'll scroll down to the next page, provided just a table here showing you a comparison from last year, where we ended the year this year on our unaudited actuals, the revised budget, and then our adopted budget. We ended the year really quite well. Typically, we would, and the board actually authorized us to transfer some funds into Fund 40 for facility projects. I will bring that to you at a later date and we'll make that transfer. But sometimes we do that before the end of the fiscal year. It just was kind of crazy this year and it didn't quite happen. So as you can see in the green in the middle, I know that's really hard to see, but you can probably see it on your computers as well, is that we had a beginning fund balance of 21 million. We had revenues of 69 million and expenditures and transfers out of 64 million. And so we had a net increase in our fund balance of 4.9 million. And so we have an ending fund balance of 26.9 million. We're required to designate what our ending fund balance, how we would use our ending fund balance. This is not set in stone. This would be a discussion with the board if we used any of those dollars moving forward. So once it drops to fund balance, it becomes one-time dollars. And so it should only be used for one-time purposes. And so often what we've done in this district, and there is a need for it to keep our facilities up and running. You heard earlier in the meeting about the pathway going up from the baseball field, that would be a place that you could use some of these funds to make those kind of corrections. We would transfer those funds to Fund 40, a facility capital improvement fund, and we track those kind of expenditures in those funds. So some of the things that we've talked about, you'll see on the other assignments there towards the bottom, is that we have assigned the use of how we would use those funds theoretically. And so moving on the next page, I provided a little more detail, very summarized on first page, revenue minus expenses equal your net increase or decrease. So on the second page, I gave you a little more information, very summarized as well. We have several different funding sources that are made up of LCFF sources, which in our district is basically property tax resources. Makes up our largest portion of revenue. Federal revenue, which as you can see from the actuals from 1920 to 2021, there was a large increase because of all of the federal dollars that came in. And there was also a small increase from our state dollars that came in. So our total revenues equal 69 million, and you can see how that breaks up. I put percentages there for your ease of understanding. And then we broke it down, and then we break it down into the major categories of expenditures. So certificated salaries, classified salaries, employee benefits, books and supplies, and so on and so forth. And so then we have total expenditures of 62 million, 62.9, and I put percentages there as well. It's no surprise that about 85% of our budget is spent on salaries and benefits. The other large part is spent on services and services, which is where we pay our utilities, comes out of that pot of money. And so utilities is typically, and it's not any different here, typically a large expense in a school district. As you move down through that report with the unaudited actuals, and I provided comparisons as well, we have an increase. And this is where you would look for the excess or deficiencies of revenues over expenditures. You want to have sufficient revenues to cover those type of expenses. If you don't, that's called a structural deficit, and we want to avoid that like the plague, and so, or the pandemic. So we had 6.1 million. We do transfer out to other sources and uses, to other funds, and I provide some detail later in the report about that. And so we transfer out to other funds that have very specific uses and are tracked in their own account. And so those are transferred out to support those activities. And then you get down to that net increase or decrease that I summarized on the first page. And once again, you can see the beginning, the net increase or decrease, and then the ending fund balance. I added percentages to this report to give you a sense of what that looks like. And the percentages is a reflection of is a function of all total general fund expenditures against our revenue. Against our fund balance, excuse me. So I added some notes here at the bottom just to give some further explanation about all of that. We ended the year, as you can see, we're really, really in good financial shape. On the third page, if you'll scroll down to the third page, and I know it's really small up there, but just again provided a breakdown of how we use our funds, the use of our funds. And then also, and then I provided just some other resources that make up the fund balance, and those are federal funds and state funds that had some balance that was left, and those become restricted balances, so those are reflected in the restricted side of the SACS report. On the actual, I'm presenting in this report both the unrestricted and the restricted, which is the combined general fund. And so in the SACS report, you would see those in 2 separate columns. Fund balance policy, I've brought this to you through most of our reporting periods, and it's just a reminder that the board has a 5% reserve. The state requires a 3% reserve, so you have a very excellent board policy to make sure that the district stays fiscally solvent. And then you also have an additional reserve that is required. And at the end of the unaudited actuals, that reserve was an additional $11.8 million. And that reserve in a basic aid district is very important because of the way our funds flow. In a state-funded district, the state sends usually, sometimes they don't, the state usually send 1/12 of the payment every year, and we get 1/12 every month. In a basic aid district, our funds basically flow where large amounts of money come in December and in May. Okay. And so every year in November, we're kind of sweating it, but I watch, Tumai and I, who's the Director of Fiscal Services, we watch that like a hawk and make sure that we're okay. All right, the general fund revenue components, I provided just a breakdown of how our revenue is, that you saw previously on page 4. And summary of key property tax. Because property tax is such a large portion of our revenue source, just provided some information in comparison from previous years. We did a pretty good job, I would say, in the business office projecting our revenue tax projection. We were short by $668,000. So pretty good projection, I would say. Okay, on page 5, contributions and transfers to restricted programs and other funds. So as you know, special education is not self-sustaining. The federal government and the state do not provide us enough money to sustain that program, so we contribute to that program. And also routine repair and maintenance requires a 3% of all general fund expenditures be set aside to maintain our buildings, and so that's a state requirement. So those are called contributions. And then we transfer out funds to those programs I was referring to. So we have child development, child nutrition, adult ed, and the retiree fund. And so the total contributions and transfers is $8 million. And then if you'll scroll down a little bit, I always like to provide you a summary of those funds. We have, I think it's 10 different accounts that we track specific activities in, and I provided the fund balance, revenue, expense, and transfers in from the general fund and the ending fund balance for each of those funds. Also in the report, a description of what those funds, the use of those funds are. And if you'll scroll down just a little bit more, there's a description there of how the funds are used. The very last thing, the next step in closing the fiscal year is that we go through an independent audit every year. So our independent auditor really starts auditing us. It feels like we just move from one to the other. They start auditing us in early spring. They're doing compliance audits. They're looking at attendance. They're looking at ASB accounts. ASB accounts are now reported in Fund 08 with the ending fund balance for that fund. And so and they are actively, they ask for a lot of information. And so the business office is not only closing the books, but also going through a pretty extensive audit during the summer. And the audit will conclude usually around November. They'll finalize the report and report to the board with the audit of the year ending June 30th. Typically occurs in January. So I'd just like to publicly thank Tumai Vong, who is our Director of Fiscal Services. She is responsible for making sure that all of this information, there's lots and lots and lots of work that goes into preparing the unaudited actuals and getting it loaded up into the SACS reports with no errors, and doing all of the supplemental reports that go with the unaudited actuals. So on the last page, I provided just a table of contents of the SACS report if you were interested in going and look at those supplemental reports. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you so much, Yvonne. I'll turn it over to the board for any questions or comments for Yvonne.
Well done. Nice, tight, concise. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think my only question is, you said we have an 8.7% increase. How much of that roughly is property tax income versus COVID monies? And do you keep a separate tally of COVID monies and where that all goes?
Yes, yes. Each of the COVID monies that have come in are assigned a resource code within the general fund, and it's restricted money. So it's restricted for a particular use. We can't exactly use it for anything we want. And so each of those grants on the COVID money, the different pots of COVID money that have come in, and I'll try to remember to provide a report to the board on that as well. We've used up quite a large amount of that money. To your question of that 8% increase in revenues over the previous year, about 3% of that was federal funds, and so 5% or so, 5 to 5.5% was other sources of revenue.
If I can add to that a little bit, Yvonne. So one of the things I want to make sure the board is aware of is when you did see that increased carryover, much of the federal monies that we received, you are allowed to spend over a couple years. And as Yvonne said, very specific. So with like the ESSER 3, 20% of it has to go to learning loss. So we're budgeting out that money over the next at least year and a half. Blaze and his team, Yvonne, they're doing a great job planning out some of that money. So much of that, I don't want anybody to get the illusion, oh, we've got a few $1 million that we could spend. No, that's been budgeted for some aspect of COVID response. It's just not all spent yet because you're not going to solve learning loss in a year. And much of that money is paying for those contact tracers you're seeing out in our schools right now, and some of the work that Craig and Rick Lopez and their teams are doing with the layered mitigation responses. So some of that money, although it wasn't spent last year, will be spent heavily over the next year or two.
Thank you for that explanation. If there are any more questions or comments for Yvonne, may I please get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the fiscal year 2020-2021 unaudited actuals financial report.
Second, please.
Second. Board President Sarah Hines.
Yes.
Board Clerk Tess Arthur.
Yes.
Board Member Carl Palestrini.
Yes.
Board Member Anne Marie Rosen.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for that, Yvonne. I know you're staying with us for agenda item 5F. This is resolution number 21-31, the GAN limit adoption. If there's any public comment on agenda item 5F, we'll go ahead and take it now. Seeing there's none, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is an annual resolution that all school districts in California have to complete. And we're required to complete a GAN limit calculation, provide that information to the board, and have the board adopt a resolution accepting the GAN limit calculation. And so with that, I'm recommending approval of the resolution.
Any questions or comments on this?
No, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2131, the GAN limit adoption.
Second.
Board President Sarah Hines.
Yes.
Board Clerk Tess Arthur.
Yes.
Board Member Carl Palestrini.
Yes.
Board Member Anne Marie Rosen.
Yes.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, agenda item 5G with Craig. Approve the negotiated agreement between the California School Employees Association, Chapter 190, CSCA, and the Carmel Unified School District, AB 1200 Public Disclosure and Associated Job Descriptions. Do we have any public comment this evening on agenda item 5G? Seeing there's none.
Thank you. The rationale actually on the agenda item outlines the agreement between CSCA Chapter 190 and CUSD. Both parties agreed upon and signed off on the attached tentative agreement, which is up at this time. The updated job descriptions were reviewed with CSCA input. The agreement cleared CSCA 610 internal review. It was also ratified by the CSCA local chapter membership. The AB 1200 financial impact was submitted by the business office to MCOE to confirm the district is able to meet its financial obligations after implementing the agreement. And it was also approved after it was reviewed by MCOE, and there is an attached letter that notes that. As a result, the agreement and associated job descriptions are here for the board's final approval.
Great, thank you. Any questions on this one? If not, I'll go ahead and take a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the negotiated agreement between the California School Employees Association, Chapter 190, and CUSD, AB 1200, Public Disclosure and Associated Job Descriptions.
A second.
Board President Sarah Hines.
Yes.
Board Clerk Tess Arthur.
Yes.
Board Member Carl Palestrini.
Yes.
Board Member Anne Marie Rosen.
Yes.
Thank you, Craig. Agenda item 5H, this is an information only agenda item this evening, and we'll receive a presentation from Ted on this one. This is agenda item 5H, information on board policy 6141.2 and associated administrative regulations. Do we have any public comment this evening on agenda item 5H? Go ahead, Ted. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I'm bringing my laptop with me. I'm not even going to try to read that up there. So let me scroll here. Pancho, if we can go to the next slide. So I wanted to start with just a quick overview, since this is our first time together talking about policy. And I wanted to go over real quickly just some basics that to make sure we're all on the same page. Policies and regulations. So as a school board, you're obviously responsible for adopting new policies. Most of those policies are often in collaboration and with support from the California School Boards Association, and oftentimes, as you saw tonight with Blaze, the district's legal counsel. Policies are the what. That is where we want the board to live. They pass policies that tell us the what. Once you guys pass a policy, it becomes my and the staff's responsibility to figure out how we're going to implement that policy. That is often the how, which are your administrative regulations, and that really lays out for everyone to clearly understand this is how we are going to attempt to meet the demands of the policy. Next slide. So policy 6142 is a policy that has been brought up for discussion. This is a policy that has been in place since 2018. It was passed on the consent calendar along with a block of other policies that came from CSBA. So I believe the district at that point, Carl, you might remember the district at that point, I think, asked for a policy review. CSBA said, here's a block of policies that we think you need. Those were looked over. They were adopted on a 5-0 vote by the school board at that time. I've got the language up there for everyone to see specifically as recommended through the work with CSBA to update all board policies. The recommendation was for the board to pass that, and again, that happened. They were up for review by the community. They were brought for a first reading, a second reading, so plenty of opportunity at that point for the community to weigh in, for the board to ask all their questions, and again, unanimously voted in 2018. Next slide. Policy 6141.2 basically talks about the role of religion in schools. And it talks about what teachers shall do anytime you cross that threshold of what does religion look like in schools. Some of the highlights there, it says teachers shall objectively discuss the influence of religious in schools, that you are able to use religious works and symbols if you're talking about culture, literature, or the arts. You can talk about common principles of all religions, but you cannot promote one religion and you cannot denigrate the beliefs or customs of another religion, and you must be highly sensitive not to interfere with the religious development of any of your impressionable students. We see this a lot with religion. We see this a lot with politics. We can talk about these things in class. Kids should not know where our beliefs lie. We should be objective, and we should make sure that we are staying factual. It also states very clearly that students may express their beliefs about religion in their studies and in their works, and we would judge them as we would any other assignment by their academic merits. Next slide. The next slide is what a school shall do. So the first one is what teachers shall do in this policy. The second one is what schools shall do. Pretty plain language here. It says that schools shall not endorse, encourage, or solicit either religious or anti-religious expression. We shouldn't lead students in prayer, but if they want to pray on their own, we let them. Make sure that school-sponsored events are not religiously oriented. Ensure that decorations are seasonal rather than religious in nature, and ensure that any of our performing arts performances are objective and part of a cultural, an objective manner if they are religious or cultural in some way. And again, ensure that the use of religious symbols that are part of a religious holiday are permitted as a teaching aid and a resource, but they need to be temporary and they need to be of that season. So that was a policy. Pancho, if we move on to the next slide, we'll get into the regulation. So this was the regulation that the staff created at that same time to talk about how we're going to implement this. And basically, it centered around, let's make sure we don't create events that might coincide with one time. Don't create a big test during a religious holiday. Don't create back to school night during a religious holiday. It also talked about programs and exhibits and making sure that the following guidelines were observed, and that is that you have the principal, so the principal in the policy or their designee is responsible for ensuring this policy. And that is that any school programs are objective, that they are consistent with this board policy, that basically you take into consideration diverse religious faiths that are represented in your community, your student body, and with your staff. We further created, if we go to the next slide, Regulations 6141.22. This was recently created by legal counsel to give further definition to some of our activities, programs, and celebrations that happen in the schools. Again, very similar in nature. They should not promote or inhibit religion. They should serve the academic goals of the school. They should provide a variety of experiences. You should teach about religion at various times of the year, not just, for example, in December. It should be in a manner that's aligned with our standards, and that observance of holidays in the classroom cannot be overly religious. You don't have to stay away from it, but you can't be overly religious. In addition, schools and the teachers within them are not prohibited from making religious references again. Works can be used in winter concerts, in art class, and activities, again, mainly your performing arts, and that we must be sensitive to any student that asks for an alternative activity. Next slide. This talks about specifically holiday displays, programs. They may include secular and religious symbols, but they must be temporary, and you can't require student or staff to participate. We may allow holiday displays on school grounds. We may allow students to observe holiday community events, and certain symbols, straight from the law related to the Christmas holiday, are considered secular in nature. Things like Santa Claus, candy canes, Christmas trees, those are not considered religious symbols given current case law. And finally, we must apply a viewpoint neutral standard in determining, again, mostly concepts around performing arts, artwork, songs, music, those types of things. So next steps, if we go to the next slide, Pancho. I'm here tonight to ask if there are, I think it's one more, Pancho, if there are any questions around our current policy, first and foremost, and then I will take any questions about the two current administrative regulations, the how, that we've created in relation to this policy. I'd start with, are there any questions about the current board policy, the what to what we're doing here?
I think my question, Ted, is as you take a fresh look at this policy, do you believe it is inclusive? And if not, do you think it needs to be further updated?
So I do believe it's inclusive. It's the policy that, again, you see across multiple districts across the state. It was reviewed by the California School Boards Association. This is their strength. This is what school board associations do. And this has been crafted. It's been in place for some time. And when you look at it, I think it does exactly what you want a board policy to do. It gives you those parameters, those guardrails around the what.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, Ted. Could you please take a big step back and let us know why we are speaking about board policy 6141.2 and regulation 6141.22 this evening?
Correct. Through our board policy, there is an opportunity for community members who would like the board to discuss a policy. They have an opportunity to request that. So in this case, we have had a community member ask that the board discuss or even maybe consider changing this board policy 6141.2.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Was there any recommended change to it that makes any sense or would make it better?
It was requested that the board have an opportunity to look at the policy and using my words, to make sure that the policy is inclusive. So yeah, to me, it was a broad request to have the board contemplate whether or not they felt this was the appropriate policy for this district at this time.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any questions on the administrative regulations, the how, the parts that the staff puts in place to make sure that we are implementing this well?
I don't think we have any at this time.
Okay, so Sarah, at this point, the board is now free to have any discussions about potential changes to the policy. If you do desire changes, we can go back as a staff, work with legal counsel, bring you a first reading, give us time to get feedback from the community, and then obviously bring it back for a second reading if that is the desire of the board.
To my fellow board members, do you want to have a further discussion on this agenda item, or should it come back to us for a second read and approval?
Well, if there is direction from the board to change the policy, we would then go back, change the policy, bring it back to you, the new policy for a first reading, then a second to pass. We're not asking for a vote tonight. I just need to know if there is direction from the board to change this policy.
You know, this is just me, I don't think so. To me, it looks like it's right in line with CSBA and right in line with what we would expect a policy to do in terms of inclusivity. I don't think the policy, we're policy people. To me, it's where it needs to be.
I believe so as well.
Same here.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
at this time, we won't take any action?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
I'd like to remind the public that our next scheduled board meeting is September 29th. That is the end of our agenda items for this evening, so may I please receive a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Make sure you're